everyone, Joe here from ActionX. Welcome to What's in the Tuber. Welcome back. This is your 7th The Crowded Room episode review. Hope you're doing safe out there in this very hot world right now. It's very, very hot. I think this is like the second or third week. I live in New York, by the way. I keep mentioning that every episode. I believe so, but it's just so damn hot. It really is. Like, I put my entire room here where I shoot on full blast before I start shooting. And literally, like, we get to the halfway mark of the show, and I'm like, I'm already sweating. Like, maybe sometimes it's not noticeable, but, like, sometimes I am sweating. But here we go, episode 7, The Crowded Room, ironically titled The Crowded Room. I feel like this was a very important episode. I will say we kind of dipped a little bit. You know, I've said, like, since episode 3, we kind of been on this upward trajectory of quality for the show. After the first two episodes were kind of a little bit of a bummer for me. Sadly, we do dip a little bit. It's still in the good zone of quality, but it does dip a little bit. I feel like this episode should have came maybe the next episode, where we've had a little bit more attachment to what the overall situation is, instead of like just, you know, how the way they ended this episode. Like, I understand it is a turning point in the story, but at the same time, I felt like this should have been episode 8 at least, instead of episode 7. I don't know. Maybe it's because, like, I'm just thinking like this feels more like we're wrapping it up, even though we still have 3 more hours to go. So yeah, that's what my head's like. But now, again, this episode does once again kind of paint everything differently in terms of just how you view the previous now 6 episodes differently. Now that you have a little bit more context of this one, it's a little bit more expository, a bit explaining on how this entire mindset works. And then, you know, now we're kind of able to like go into like the final stretch of episodes with just it being like, I believe everything's now on the table. Now we're just wrapping up this storyline and figuring out how did it all really kick off from here. But overall speaking, like, as much as I thought this was still a good episode, I do think that the quality did decline a little bit, and as well as this kind of felt like an out of place episode, that this should have been an episode more ahead than instead of like where it was right now. So with that being said, let's go for the Butcher recap and talk about this week's episode of The Crowded Room. So we begin with another session with Danny and Raya. Raya is now officially going to introduce the aspect to Danny that there are multiple people residing within him. But before she does that, she wants to show him the clip from the last week's episode that we did not get to see viewership-wise, where the detective that has a thing for Raya comes over to her apartment, shows over this video footage he got from one of the local businesses that, you know, just installed security cameras. So it definitely kind of like repaints everything differently. So Raya shows it to Danny, and in the video, there is no Adriana is not present. There is the stepdad and there is Danny, but there is no Adriana anywhere at all. So that means the entire story of like Danny and Adriana were planning this entire spiel is not there. So that definitely creates a bit of an issue. Obviously, Danny's kind of like imploding right now. He thinks this is all, you know, fake footage, that they altered it, that like it's impossible. Adriana was definitely there. He starts having this like psychotic break. Then I believe Yinsen or Ilsen, I forgot his name, the freaking landlord. He wasn't in the last episode, so I forgot. He shows up. All of a sudden, he just appears right behind Danny. And the way they framed this opening shot was like, he expresses to Raya directly, "You made a mistake. You're gonna pay for it." And I was like so confused, and I'm like, wait, what is this? Are we getting into like some supernatural territory with this show? Because like I was getting a little bit confused here. But when we come back from the title credits, we get to Danny, who wakes up in front of the barn that we keep seeing for the last couple episodes. He enters the barn, and it's like it goes all the way down. It's just a bunch of staircases that lead downwards. He heads all the way down, and he finds a little council in like a clearing of the barn, which consists of Max, the landlord, and his 2 best friends. So it also confirms that the 2 best friends are actually, so to be quick, these 4 are personalities of his. So when we see them on the show, it's just a figment of his imagination, like a representation of his personality taking over, to give Danny some means that like he is not he doesn't. He's not trying to be conscious of the fact that there are multiple personality, but in his brain he assumes that that they're not there. So that definitely kind of like creates like actually not my bad, not Max, Jack, my bad. Danny goes to see them, and obviously Jack's like, you're not supposed to be here, you're not supposed to see us, so I think it's best you go back to bed. So he gets transported to the corner of the room where he's sleeping again. So Ilson, the landlord has taken control of Danny. He's basically verbally threatening Raya, getting up all close to her because she made a very bad mistake. This was not part of the plan. Danny was not supposed to know that there has been signs that these people that were supposedly very prevalent in his life the last couple of years were just not there. But it does create a bit of before we go any further. Actually, no, let me finish the scene up, then I'll go back to what I was saying before. Eventually, Jack and the other two friends, I forgot their names already, but one's the stoner and the other one was the cool guy. They tried talking him out of it, trying to hey, calm down, you're basically gonna throw Danny in solitary confinement if you keep this up. And eventually, they managed to calm him down. I want to say Jack takes over the body, and it allows them to sacrifice themselves, get him taken away by the cops as they drag him away back to his cell. And then, of course, back at the council room, they're like, this was not acceptable because, again, we are at a very crucial stage where, we're trying to avoid Danny from going to prison, and this outburst did not help them out whatsoever. So just to make the context of it, so Danny is the main person, but he's sleeping right now, meaning that any one of these personalities, at least these core four, could take over his body at any point. Obviously, we've seen Jack a couple of times. Now we see the landlord take over, and then at some point, one of his two friends also took over as well, depending on what the situation calls for. And again, similar to how episode 6 kind of repaints everything, from the last 5 episodes, this episode kind of repaints everything from the last 6 episodes. Because at first, we thought Jack was the only other personality. At least that would... I know, the phrase is multiple personalities sort of mean that there would be other personalities. But at the same time, it's like, well, we actually don't know that 100% because, it's just that was the way we've imagined it. But now, saying that, no, the landlord's the personality, and his two best friends were personalities too. So the idea of, Danny being considered a bit of, a weirdo... Because again, as I said before, when we got to that point in episode 5 and 6, where Danny was telling the perspective of his side, meaning that he was telling the story as he was the hero, for his perspective, for his vision. So in his vision, his best friends were real people. That the landlord was a real person. That Jack was a real person. But in reality, no, this is just the personality is just taking over Danny's body. So it does kind of, paint a little bit of a picture where, Danny is talking to himself. He's thinking he's talking to his friends, but no, he's just talking to, figments of his imagination. So I'm not surprised that the kids around him would, call him weird, call him, a freak because they don't know he's there. They don't know. And it's it was prevalent since the first episode, really, if you really think about it, because, at least one of these personalities has been around since the beginning. Also, it just paints the picture, okay, so Yinsen is I don't know why I keep saying Yinsen. Maybe it's, I got something else in my brain, but the landlord would only kick in when Danny's in danger, when he's about to get his ass kicked or is about to be killed. Definitely, it is a bit of a curious conundrum, because, there are certain scenes where it's kind of difficult to explain what the personality is. There are definitely scenes, I think, when we were with the drug dealer, where it's very prevalent that, unless, again, we didn't get to see, what the real scene was. It was just basically Danny retelling it in his own version. It is a bit weird to, have, the drug dealer, for instance, converse with the two personalities that, at this point now, were being classified as pigmentations. How that scene worked out. Definitely, now there's, if you go back to rewatch it, definitely it'll be okay, definitely this is a scene that, it's not the true vision. It wasn't until, the last episode, Rise episode, where, now we started, really getting, what is the true, how does this all really work, so to speak, the beginning of how that all operates, per se. And then we kind of go through Danny's life, Danny's body in the prison, in the jailhouse, where, mostly one of his best friends takes over his body, just playing basketball, or just trying to survive out there, while Jack and the landlord is basically unreserved. They're basically the people that are, they'll come out when they are really in like a pickle. These kids are just like, yeah, they're just like the closest thing to like Danny, like acting like Danny's age. So like we'll let them be for the time being. But they're definitely like considering the fact that, they need to find a way to get Danny out of this. This is where it starts to get a little bit of a separation where some of the personalities do want to let Danny, let's just, admit the fact that, we're here. We'll do our best to have Danny mentally classified as insane so that maybe he can go away, not to prison. But at the same time, Jack's starting to line up with the idea of like, well, no, maybe we just need to pay our punishment, now that, to preserve Danny's subconscious to his mental state to like not admit that we're real and just like, go to prison and face our charges for a little bit. And to be fair, like, I forgot how long they were going to charge him for, but like, I don't think anyone was killed per se. They don't have any evidence to pin him on murder. They just have, have him as like, a menace to society and, having a weapon. So definitely that's going to, put maybe a few years on him, but it wouldn't be enough to like, purposely classify him as like, we need to put him away forever. It's not going to do that. I want to say after that point, we get back to Ryan, the lawyer, who has Danny as a client, and they're discussing what the plan is because they're about to go to the board and like, pitch them to the other panelists, to the judge that, Danny is mentally insane. He has multiple personality disorder that like, he needs to be, put in a clinic, put it like, a place where he can get the proper treatment instead of going to prison. Obviously, at the time being, it's more difficult to prove this sort of thing nowadays because again, it was still very much a area of like, it wasn't fully like, proven yet because, the science and like, the research just wasn't that advanced yet. This was the 70s. It's nowhere to where we are now in the 2020s. So it is more difficult to convince people that, this is something that actually exists. But Rye's still holding out that like, hopefully, when they converse and like they show Danny off to them that this would be enough to like, convince them otherwise. So, they're already at the meeting. They're explaining to the other people. They're not finding it believable whatsoever. They don't believe this is the case. And then eventually they're like, okay, bring in Danny, bring him in. And I want to say Jack takes over as the main personality here, and like he's trying to like still kind of have himself like trying to maintain the fact that Danny is perfectly just one able mind. That yeah, he was there. Like the footage at this point can't prove him one way or another. So definitely. It kind of just destroyed everything Rye was working for to like, make him, make it know that like he has, multiple people inside of him. And, definitely that, when Jack, eventually shuts off a little bit, he's like, yeah, this was necessary. This was the right motivation to do so. And like, to like proceed forward. So the other lawyers, the other I guess the defense were like, yeah, this entire thing is not gonna work. He is going to face a full day in trial, and like yeah, he will be served. So definitely everything falls apart. Even the lawyers trying like one desperate plead with one of the attorneys, it's not working out whatsoever. She knows that the moment I start digging it up more, I'm gonna get more evidence on this guy. So this is it. I'm not gonna like definitely miss this opportunity to not do so. Rye talks to Jack/Danny, and she's like, you ruined everything. Like, definitely not. Everything's ruined. Danny's going to be in prison. There is no way that the landlord is going to protect him once he's on the inside because, like, you're dealing with low-level people here. Imagine up there where, like, you're facing against, like, really bad motherfuckers. So, definitely, you just screwed him over. And then that leaves him to ponder, in the mind for the rest of the night of, like, what is the next step now? And they're all trying to figure out that did they do the right choice? Is this the right call? Because like at the end of the day, they're trying to protect Danny, but it feels like they're not really doing their job. It's just they keep digging the hole further and further for Danny, and that maybe it's time for Danny to finally face the music and like be the primary personality again. Like actually make the decisions that he wants to do in his life finally after having let these personalities take over for like a decade or so. So they agree, yeah, so we're going to have to die so Danny can, like, finally, take primary control over himself. So, Jack shoots the landlord, and then I guess off-screen they just all kill each other. And then Danny finally wakes up, but that's only because Adriana shows up to wake him up as well. And it also confirms that Adriana's a personality, too. So I'm like, so wait, was Danny just in that abandoned house for, like 2 years? I don't think that's right. I personally don't think that's right. Again, like that's the difficulties when you're doing these sort of things where like you got to be really careful on how you set up, like, you know, if you're gonna have a big revelation that, like, you know, turns everything you watched before in a new perspective, you have to like really like paint those scenes very, you know, specifically so that it works in both contexts, where for a first time viewer they would not be aware, but then when you're a second time viewer and you understand what's going on, you will understand the nuance and like the different take that scene, you know, represents by the time you watch it. And there were like certain scenes where like, yeah, again, like these make absolutely no sense whatsoever on what they're trying to do over here. And so Adriana, like, you know, walks with Danny, basically just trying to tell him, like, you know, all the scenes where like we see Adriana with like all the dead bodies before, those were all previously dead personalities that at some point in Danny's, you know, past decade, they were responsible for protecting him, for, you know, popping up when the situation arises, and then, you know, at some point they were killed off because they weren't deemed useful anymore. And, you know, some of the stragglers, such as the landlord, stayed around because, you know, Danny always needed a physical force. Jack as well, for like, you know, wheeling him out of like very difficult situations per se. But yeah, now's the time where, like, you know, Danny needs to go forth and take control of his life, take control of his destiny, and figure out what does he want to do. You know, not let these personalities take over and, like, you know, decide what he wants to do. No, Danny has to think for himself, and he needs to decide for himself. And as much as that's a scary fact to know, he has to do it eventually. Otherwise, you know, he's going to pay the consequences of all of his actions eventually. So they all let Danny go forth, you know, to become the primary person again. And, you know, obviously, you know, Danny probably is culture shock because, you know, this is all like too new for him. But as well as the same fact, like, you know, this is the same one where Danny finds out he has multiple personalities, or there are other people inside of his head. So having that fact finally in him is like, it's not sitting well with him, that when he gets to his next meeting with Rye, who is still severely pissed off at Jack for, like, you know, basically destroying their entire defense before they even began. And she's being like, why am I still doing here? Like, you know, the case is basically done. Like, you're going to go to jail. I'm not jail, to prison. Like, why am I still doing here? And then Danny finally comes on and say, like, yeah, I know I have all these voices in my head. I need help. Like, I do not want to go to prison. So what do we do now? And that's where we end the episode off with, like, you know, just the revelation of, like, Danny is fully back, but now it's like, how do we pay the dues of what his personalities had to cost to protect them? So yeah, for me, like, again, I still hold the fact that, like, I would have loved it if we had either a whole episode or more scenes where, like, we see just the counts of the big. And again, I know an hour is a long time. It is, like, it's not like something that, like, you know, is short, sweet, and, like, to the point. But, like, I definitely would have liked it more to, like, have more of the dynamics between them, because, like, we've seen them as characters in their own right. Only Jack has had, like, you know, an episode where, like, he was a personality and not just a character. But, you know, just throwing in the fact the landlord, the friends, Adriana were all personalities. I would have loved it if we had a whole episode where we just have them interacting with Danny and us getting the different perspectives with them taking the lead. And maybe we still will. Maybe that will be episode 8 or 9's focus of, like, we see the show with that specific perspective. But as of right now, like, I feel like the impact where, like, the scene where, like, we see the personalities pushing Danny forward, like, maybe if this was, like, you know, painted in a different way where, like, you know, Danny was, like, seeing the physical friends, you know, sending him off, maybe it would have had a different impact. But for me, with this scene, I did not take it much as, like, this is, you know, very emotional. Like, definitely, I feel the importance of the scene, the way that Danny needs to grow up and, like, figure out his own problems for himself. But it didn't really, like, it didn't have that impact for me. It did not. Like, it just, I feel like we needed another episode to, like, really nail that home before you have the whole, like, okay, Danny, we're done with you. You're going to be thrown off the deep end. You're on your own. Like, I would have loved that. I really would. It doesn't, I still felt it, but I just really would have wished I had that, like, one more emotional punch. Like, you know, that, like, that deep gut punch that, like, that we desperately needed from this scene. But other than that, like, you know, just in general, like, you know, I do admit, like, again, I do appreciate the fact the show is giving these opportunities to, like, turn things to a new direction, turn it on your head a little bit, keep you guessing a little bit. But definitely this episode was a bit of a downer. Not too bad, but, like, it did decline a little bit. And definitely going forward is just like, like now it's like now we're in like the final stages of like, the trial and just, like it feels like everything has been resolved, kind of like we have the firm understanding of the story. Now we just have to figure out how do we close up this story. They have 3 hours left, which seemed like a whole lot of time, but I'm not sure. Like considering the way how this show began, I'm kind of scared of how they're gonna end it. So we'll see how it goes. But for now, I'm gonna give this episode 1.5 thumbs up. So I still enjoyed it. Just did not reach the heights of the last episode for me. But let me know in the comments below what you think of this week's episode of The Crowded Room. I would love to have a discussion with you down below as always. But I believe that's going to do it for me today, everyone. So otherwise, this has been What's the Two from ActionX reviewing every episode in The Crowded Room. If you want to know what we're doing normally, What's to do besides our Crowded Room episode reviews. Currently, right now, we are doing Nancy Drew episode reviews each and every week after brand new episodes on the CW, so go check them out there. But if you don't care about The Crowded Room, your luck will be, we'll have a brand new episode review for you next week, so stay tuned until then. We're wrapping it up. We got 3 more weeks of episodes left, and then afterward, we'll be doing a full definitive review based on the show by itself. At the end of it, so yeah, so we still have a little bit of ways to go. We're not quite done yet. We still have a month left. But yeah, again, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't yet. Like, favorite, share if you want to. Ring the bell, follow us on social media. But for all you people that have been watching, thank you so much again. But until next week, stay safe out there. Be good to each other. Stay cool. And peace out.